Yeah, I do definitely have my doubts as well, because one of the things that you have to realize now with the modern builds of Control Warrior, now that Armor Smith and Risky Skipper are no longer a possible combination, the armor gain is kind of limited. Even Shield Block is no longer available in Standard. So the real ways that you're trying to gain armor, you're looking at Armor Vendor, Kargath Blade Fist, which is, you know, pretty fickle in terms of its ability to gain you armor, Scrap Golem. There are armor gain cards in there, but they're not quite so explosive as they have been in the past. And armor gain for a control deck at the moment is an absolute must-have, because with Rogue, high amounts of burst damage, Mage, huge amounts of burst damage, if you're not able to get out of range, the deck cannot function. But having said that, against Warrior, slightly more limited in terms of its burst, so simply board control should hopefully be enough for VirtuozZ.
Very much true. So let's go ahead and hop into it. The onus is on Cheonsu. VirtuozZ, if given the freedom, would hero power until the end of time and not play any cards and still be in a dominant position to do so. And VirtuozZ will be the one sitting down rather passively. VirtuozZ, a regular mainstay of the Masters Tour, qualifying for Madrid, Montreal, and Los Angeles last year in 2020, and also regularly appearing in some of these tournaments, able to actually get a tournament win just a month ago in the DreamHack Community Cups, which was definitely a nice confidence boost there. And so let's see if VirtuozZ can continue some of that momentum and build up. Every single Masters Tour that he's appeared in, he's done better in with a better winning record. This is by far his best performance so far. And
he could be following it up pretty well here with Rattlegore already in hand. That is a very big find, because I think if he was just to play a pure fatigue style of gameplay where he never actually puts a win condition of his own, eventually he would lose, because this warrior deck from Cheonsu, the Rush Warrior, can play super slowly. You can just accrue a bunch of resources, buff them all up, and then just slowly drip feed your threats onto the board, rather than committing anything too heavily into a brawl. But now with Rattlegore in hand and Faceless Manipulator as well, come turn 8 and then 9, he's just got his win condition ready to go.
Does seem like it. Minefield is very clean of a turn here. I think VirtuozZ thinking if there was any reason to use his coin here aggressively to try to get onto the board to challenge, what would Talon Forward even draw here, since he already has Rattlegore in the hand and his Faceless and the other Scrap Golem? I'm curious. It's probably just the other Scrap Golem, huh?
Yeah.
Alrighty. Well, from Cheonsu's perspective, there's nothing even to rush into, and that's got to feel a little bit frustrating. Plays the Runthok, though, which is going to be hard to immediately kill. Shield Slam being used. Cheonsu wisely attacking to get it outside of the Shield Slam range, and maybe an opportunity for Cheonsu to finally put something together, as I don't see a convenient way. Or actually, he does have the Blade Storm in the middle, so he can just commit to that and removing one of the bigger threats in the deck. And he has so much removal that I think he should be okay parting ways with that.
Yeah, for sure. It's very well timed from Cheonsu, I will say, because the only real threat in the deck, as you said, was the Blade Storm. And on turn 5, VirtuozZ really wanted to play one of his many 5-drops, the double Scrap Golem, the Talon Forging as well. So I think that Cheonsu very much made it as awkward as possible for his opponent. But even with that nice timing, there's still just the ability to go for perfect mana utilization, draw the Outrider's Axe, follow up with your 5-drops. I think it's just looking good for VirtuozZ here. I think Cheonsu is really going to struggle once that Rattlegore comes down.
Does look like that might be the case here. VirtuozZ picks up Armor Vendor, not particularly strong, just to help him get early board presence if needed in faster matchups. If he's banning Priest, you know, potentially trying to stay alive versus some of those aggressive decks. So, do you have a preference of a 5-drop that you would like to play here, Derek?
I think probably Scrap Golem. The fact that there's a 1/10 on the board means that the swing of that plus the sword in hand would take out Talon a little bit too cleanly. And Talon really doesn't fill an especially useful niche quite yet, because all it's going to do, as you said earlier, is draw the other Scrap Golem, which is not a necessity at this point for VirtuozZ. And I mean, at all points, I've basically agreed what VirtuozZ has done by saving the coin. I think it makes it that he's more likely to be able to get Rattlegore down before there's a huge amount of pressure on board. And he will just carry on with his very simple game plan. Cheonsu, I guess, looking at Fishy Flyer just to have a bit more value.
Okay, Rusted Raider, very clean way to kill the Scrap Golem. But, you know, in the end, still is just playing one attack minions. Oh, okay, preemptively setting up Shield of Honor. All right, I don't mind that. It is a little bit of a trickier card to use in this kind of deck, given that you don't have, as Derek mentioned, things like the Risky Skipper package to naturally damage your own minions. And, you know, we have seen a lot of decks, or rather a lot of people try out this deck with Shield of Honor. I wasn't really sold on it myself when I tried it. I found it sitting in my hand quite a few times. The only exception would be Playmaker, so you can copy a rush minion of yourself with 1 health remaining, and then you can use a Shield of Honor. That felt like kind of a narrow situational use as opposed to ubiquitously good quality minions with a lot of stats.
No, I fully agree. I think there's too little card draw in the deck to be justifying playing 1-cost spells like this. You need every card in your deck to be impactful, whereas, like you said, a lot of the time it's just going to be drawing pretty dead with the Shield of Honor. Can't unfortunately see what the options are here off of the Scorpid, but I mean, basically any of the myriad removal spells from Warrior, I think you'd be happily picking up here.
Yeah, I'm definitely feeling the same thing. VirtuozZ picks up the Cutting class. Okay. Speaking of card draw, that's really nice to pick up.
You're in my school now!
Yeah, absolutely the perfect time for the Troublemaker. Disrupts that coin Rattlegore, which Cheonsu is going to be incredibly aware of. He knows that that is very likely to come down, even not having seen Talon to guarantee that the Rattlegore is in hand at this point. So putting maximum pressure on the turn before so that some other line has to be forced out, likely Brawl here in this instance.
Yeah, this is a good Brawl board, and you have the Armor Vendor to give yourself an increased chance. I mean, it's still pretty reasonable for you to make sure you kill off all the big threats, but you even have a chance of winning by throwing that Armor Vendor into the mix. And so let's see what ends up coming out the other side. 5 go in, only 1 comes out. Pretty much slow to the Taunt Divine Shield as well as Troublemaker, and the Armor Vendor comes out on top for Cheonsu. And now VirtuozZ is in commanding position here. And to make matters worse, with Kargoth Blade Fist, Kargoth Prime gets shuffled in, Talon Forwarding will guarantee draw that, making it even more difficult for Cheonsu to put together a meaningful offensive. This is looking like it is the 11th hour here for Cheonsu already. Very desperate, and another immediate response picked up by VirtuozZ to destroy this Alex Strauss in the form of Lord Barov. Did have ways to actually deal with it without the Lord Barov, but this makes it a lot more convenient if he just wants a 1-card response here.
Must burn them.
I mean, you say that, but I kind of like the look of going Kargoth plus Talon, because yes, you have to tank the 8 damage, which is scary, but this is basically all the burst damage in Warrior dealt with. You guarantee yourself Kargoth Prime on the following turn, which means even if there's too much pressure to go Rattlegore, you can just tempo out a 10-10 that gets you 10 armor while you're at it as well. I don't even think you have to go Barov here. Just save it for if there's a wide board that you have to clear.
Well, can use Athletic Studies first. Maybe that ends up changing the play. Doubtful. I mean, but it is possible. Could find even perhaps a second Kargoth Prime, make the problem a lot more simpler for him. And will end up playing what looks like to be Kargoth Blade Fist. Oh,
Wow.
okay.
I did not expect
Very
that.
cheeky. Yeah, I wasn't expecting that for a few reasons, but you know, let's break down what this play actually means. Is this the win condition, the true win condition? You know, we talk about how Radagor could be like this way for you to dominate the board and put yourself in a very favorable position. But is this like 100% line that VirtuozZ is taking?
I mean, it's just saying that one Rattlegore is enough, and the difference between second Rattlegore and second Kargath Prime is close enough in terms of value, and Kargath Prime offers you an extra safety as well. I am definitely not going to commit one way or the other saying that it's definitely the correct play to go for here to VirtuozZ, because I have not played this version of Warrior deck at all, this build of control. But my instincts do say that this should be more than enough for him to close out the game, with Talon able to tutor out that Kargath Prime in addition to the Rattlegore already in hand. I think it should be more than enough.
A conundrum.
Yeah, it's looking like that is the case here. VirtuozZ with that Talon can set that up and is still probably feeling a little bit uncomfortable. That's what Ringmaster Watley does really well, which is just put enough resources in hand to make you start being spooked a little bit here. Gonna draw with the Outrider's Axe. See if he can pick up Kargath Prime. And that's gonna be just a Talon Forward Ring instead to guarantee it by the next turn.
Yeah, he's just got all his bases covered. The Tempo Samuro there, I think, is fine. It was an activator to go with Barov, but of course Bladestorm or Sword and Board are both also potent activators of Barov. And yeah, as we've been saying time and again, with the Kargath Prime ready to come in addition to the Rattlegore, I think Cheonsu has his work cut out for him to try and wrestle this one back. He does have Playmaker, Parade Leader, and double Bumper Car, however, which is a very powerful combo. It can basically guarantee to clear any board that VirtuozZ can develop, aside from Rattlegore, obviously. But the question is, do you want to go for it now? Because you're kind of just letting them use their removal to clear it off.
Yeah, it's a good point. It feels like this is the time for Cheonsu to go in from his perspective, so he's just going to commit to it for now. Maybe get some meaningful buffs. But yeah, he knows exactly what's going to happen, though, because of the way Kargath Prime got copied. He knows one's going to get drawn.
I will say, I think he's making the best out of a bad situation. This double Krasnov play is very, very cool. I haven't seen this particular combo before. And it does allow a 20 damage weapon to swing face turn after turn. Eat your heart out, Tyrion. And even Kargath gaining 10 here. Even the second Kargath gaining another 10. That just cancels out the weapon, which means that if Cheonsu was ever going to have a chance of taking a win in this game, this is the way to do it.
Yeah, VirtuozZ does have the fabled 11 mana play with the Bladestorm and a Kargath Prime. Everything lines up very nicely stat-wise for that because of the convenient 3 health that's spread across the board. So I'm looking at that. I'm thinking if VirtuozZ wants to do any extra credit here, does end up swinging with the Outrider's Axe to draw Rancor. Another way to gain a bunch of life. Very good against the 4 Dark Rune Riders that happen to be in Cheonsu's hand. This is still looking real tough for Cheonsu. VirtuozZ just has to ensure that he is not going to throw this game away. All that's required for him, just to clear the board and ensure that he has enough life.
I think this is fine. I really like the fact that he's not just tempoing out Kargath Prime. I think you really don't want to play that unless you're rushing into a minion, because of all the rush minions in hand. A single copy of Conditioning, as we see there in the hand, or a Parade Leader would make quick work of the Kargath in combination with the Riders. And that was the card that Cheonsu was looking for. He's had a powerful turn into a powerful top deck here, and with a 6/8 Crab Rider, in addition to all these Dark Moon Riders, I don't know if it's going to get there, but it's a very, very good effort.
Yeah, honestly, this ended up becoming a lot closer than I anticipated for it. And Cheonsu has set up a meaningful offensive. He knows about Kargath Prime. And so he should do some counting here. Oh, but I think he's just playing around the next the next layer of removal. Knows that while the one copy of Brawl is being used, Rancor and Lord Barov is definitely a threat. So if he ended up playing that and overextended, then the game would 100% be over.
Must burn them all.
I'm kind of interested in... Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead, Derek.
Well, I was going to say that I'm kind of interested in getting the Kargath Prime down on this turn because VirtuozZ has been pretty hesitant to actually get any of his own threats on the board. And with the Rattlegore, that made sense because he was under a lot of pressure. But on this turn, you could go for Barov, Kargath, and then coin out the Sword board to kill off your own Barov at the end. You could even just go Kargath, Sword board, swing in order to clear off most of these minions in play and just leave one up. It's taking it slow again, though.
Yeah, trying to favor the inevitability of having these big threats, but more importantly, showing a lot of respect, I think, for what Warrior is capable of. And Cheonsu baiting out the removal, 10 life being gained from that Rancor, which is just so tough of a pill to swallow. But Cheonsu also picked up the second Parade Leader. That's still a decent amount of stats that can be piled all in one turn. And VirtuozZ has used 2 Blade Storms, the Brawl, 1 Rancor, Lord Barov, Shield Slams, I think 1 Sword board. Almost running out of removal, which is quite surprising.
I mean, there's only 1 Brawl in the deck, so that's gone as an answer. Obviously, if he can get second Blade Storm here, he's in a fantastic position. And Kargath Prime can absolutely buy him some time. But none of these is clearing the board right now, and every one of these riders is a lot of pressure.
Well, does have 11 mana, so can play Kargath Prime and the Rusty Raider, but running into that problem that you described, Derek, right now, VirtuozZ doesn't have enough mana to spend on all these minions and cards in his hand right now.
Well, I mean, that's the problem. He can't play the Rusty Raider and the Kargath, right? Because one of them doesn't get the discount from the athletic studies, so it's even scarier than it was initially looking.
No, you're totally right. I forgot about that. Discount does not carry over. I was just looking at it both flat. And now VirtuozZ has to use his Sword and Board instead to clear with the Rancor.
Is this really better than just playing Kargath? You get to gain 10 armor and put a much, much bigger minion in play. And now he doesn't want to draw. Oh no, wait,
he wants to get the extra armor.
Yeah. Okay.
Wants the extra armor. Coin hero power. I was wondering whether or not VirtuozZ would end the game with the coin, the ultimate victory cigar in Hearthstone. And I think that Cheonsu, have a glimmer of hope, but the Kargath Primes, maybe Cheonsu can continue to push a little bit damage, but I think this is just a little bit too much.
It is looking that way, and fair play to VirtuozZ. With the line he went for, in the end, it was very different to just playing out the Rusty Raider, instead going for a full, or almost full clear with the Rancor in the end. And now, I think we can agree, the Kargath Primes should be able to just close it out.
Well, first gonna draw. It actually came down very close because you can see that even after the Kargath Prime comes down, there's still a good amount of power being represented.
That's true.
6, 12, plus 5, 17. He'd be at 24.
I mean, that's
just another Alexstrasza blast.
That's ETC for lethal, right? That's still in the deck.
It's true. He just doesn't have the method to get to it very easily. Just immediately trades with the Kargath. Kargath 2, Electric Boogaloo, about to hit the board.
Well, it actually would have been 1 off lethal with ETC off the top. It was pretty insane.
Right. It's 2 each.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, VirtuozZ cut it very close, but I mean, that's what the Warrior wants to do. It wants to lull you into a false sense of security and truly capitalize. And the foresight that VirtuozZ had, recognizing that he's probably going to be trading down the entire game and prioritizing the double Kargoth Blade Fist, ended up paying off. Cheonsu with, back-to-back whiffs here. Playmaker is not going to be it. He's going to hang around just to hover and see if there's any last hope, but there is even worse news following the previous report. Rattlegore is now reported for duty, and VirtuozZ just going to crush Cheonsu in terms of the board quality for the rest of the game, just by the nature that this Rattlegore can't get answered.
Yeah, he throws in the towel there. It was a lot closer than I thought it was going to be. It was a very valiant effort from Cheonsu. I loved the way that he was just piece by piece pushing out the threats onto the board, making it so it was a little bit too big for just Kargath Prime to deal with, but a little bit too small to warrant a Barov and Rancor clear at all points. It was that real sweet spot that I think he was very, very proficient at hitting. But for VirtuozZ, even though he definitely did not play it in the way I was expecting him to, the double Kargath play in the end was more than enough value for him to win the game, and probably just a lot safer than double Rattlegore was in the end. So good recognition from him.
Very much so, and just almost like a textbook way to approach it. I think perhaps we have been, conditioned to believe that these slower decks eventually need to be proactive, but Control Warrior has always been one of those more unique archetypes that has been able to just play this kind of style of remove everything and stick one threat. And VirtuozZ played extremely patient and was heavily rewarded with the ability to just cruise to a victory after he cleared just checkpoint after checkpoint. And Control Warrior's still getting VirtuozZ the wins, right? We talked about how if a lot of people are bringing this deck, maybe it doesn't necessarily do well in terms of the win rate. But when only a few people bring it to try and beat the field, you might see some lopsided stats and win rate for this kind of specific deck, which is just a great read from VirtuozZ overall, as it ends up paying off and getting him not just into the top 16, but also beyond it, and maybe even winning the tournament.
I totally agree. I think that it's a very, very good meta read. If you're going for the ban pre-strategy, you get to build your warrior in a very, very lean build. You get to strip all the late game out of there. The only card that costs more than 5 in the deck is Rattlegore, and everything else is just removal, card draw that gives you a very, very consistent list where you're constantly going to be able to clear off all the minions that matter. And as I was saying, I was kind of afraid that it might not be able to gain enough armor. He gained like 40 armor over the course of that game. It was clearly more than enough to be able to take down even the likes of Mage or Rogue were he to face that.
And we're going to turn to a different type of play altogether. VirtuozZ going to Token Druid for game number 2. Very clean. A lot of players appreciate the consistency of Token Druid. You can squeeze in these fancy legendaries or one-off inclusions. But for the most part, you want your deck to be very reliable whenever you play things like Fungal Fortunes, or you're trying to just build up that really powerful board. So I'm a big fan of 2 of Token Druid. I know Gia and I were talking about it last time. How do you feel about it, Derek, when you look at a deck list this lean?
Well, I like the idea of 2 ofs in all your slots. The very interesting thing here, though, is that while both these players have, the full 2-of list with no legendaries or 1-ofs in there, they are both different from the standard build. Cheonsu has gone for 2 guidance and slotted out Soul of the Forest. VirtuozZ has gone for 2 guidance and slotted out the Pride's Fury as the other 4-mana buff card that you can go for there. I think based on the way I've seen Token Druid play out, I would lean towards Cheonsu's side more. I think the Pride's Fury is just most of the time in this metagame a better card than Soul of the Forest. Traditionally Soul of the Forest was very powerful to play around the likes of Brawl or any of these other mass AoE clears. There's not all too many of those in the game, actually, at the moment, and just being able to buff the health of your board is likely going to be enough to keep it alive, given that most board clear comes in the form of AoE, Priest AoE damage to clear off the board with Zyrella or Mage going for Flame Strike. If you have a high health value, your board is probably sticking.
Yeah, it's a good point. And, the Pride's Fury, we've seen it be pretty effective to get things out of AoE range, as you were talking about. And maybe that ends up being something later on that VirtuozZ wish he had. But we shall see. We're going to Warrior versus Druid for game number 2. Cheonsu really wants to get this win through. Druid in general, in terms of its overall stat line, has been pretty solid. 52% win rate, which ties it with some of the best decks in the field alongside Warrior and Mage. Everything else below 50%, but not too far out. In fact, it's outside of Shaman and Hunter, which aren't super popular, low sample size. We've actually had some pretty close win rates overall, which is surprising, but also in a good way. You know, I think a lot of people were expecting more polarization, especially for a class like Shaman, getting a 48% win rate. That's pretty good.
It's not bad at all. Cheonsu, though, kicking things off here with pretty much the dream hand against Token Druid. You want to get on the board, and you want to get on the board quick. Parade Leader, Bumper Car is a beautiful starting hand, and even just Playmaker to throw down on turn 3. If Stage Dive doesn't give you anything better, that's perfectly good. I like the look of this hand a lot.
VirtuozZ, though, with the unfortunate pickup of a 2-mana card, making it very tricky with how to guess the weight, but ends up getting rewarded with the Innervate. As a lot of times, when you get that 2-mana card, you can end up not drawing. And Cheonsu just going to take advantage of that by immediately pushing out this Bumper Car and pressuring the Druid. I like it. Don't give Druid too much breathing room. If they commit to building up a big amount of resources, capitalize, punish them for the first few turns of the game.
Interesting as to how you're supposed to sequence this now, because you could obviously go for Lunar into Nature Studies, which would then allow you to go Glowfly on the following turn without having to expend the Innervate, importantly. And he does go for that. Picking up the Thorn Growth, you probably, just hold on to that, even though you could have thrown it down on this turn, just to give yourself the biggest Glowfly next turn.
Yes, that makes sense to me. And VirtuozZ just wants to start fighting back for the board, recognizing that Cheonsu could end up making him pay. And with the Lunar Eclipse being used, I was going to talk about this.
Yeah.
If you see a Lunar Eclipse, do you play the Playmaker? And now Lunar Eclipse number 2 finds its way into VirtuozZ's hand.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is 100% the correct play for Cheonsu to go with Playmaker, because drawing a minion off Stage Dive, you can then just delete the vast majority of boards that Druid is going to develop here, at least most of the board, if not all of it. But the Lunar Eclipse here, at first glance, seems insane to clear off the Playmaker. When you look at it a little bit closer, it's kind of yucky. You only get 5 Glowflies out of it. One of them instantly gets cleared off, and you have to expect that at least one other is going to die alongside it.
It's true. The mana discounts don't roll over, so it's not like you can Glowfly Swarm and then innervate the Lunar Eclipse, which is quite sad. If that was the case, then by all means, VirtuozZ would, 1, be able to clear that Playmaker, but 2, also be arrested for illegal play. It's not possible. Unless it's classic Hearthstone, I guess, with 2-mana innervate games.
I still think it's absolutely the correct play, because you're kind of expecting one to die. In the worst case, it's like buffed Crab Rider to kill 2. And even if 3 minions die here, you can still then go Thorn Growth, Innervate, Soul of the Forest, and stick some kind of a board presence leading into the Arbor upturn. Wow, okay.
Oh my, this was a disastrous outcome for Cheonsu. He needed to have a playable Rush Minion to limit the size of the board, and he didn't get that.
That's the one bad outcome. Even Samuro, I think you would happily take just because you can play it next turn to clear the board.
Oh boy, all of a sudden, the opening, it was just a little crack, has now widened and has the potential to just even be game ending for VirtuozZ, just by the fact that he has such a resilient amount of board potential through the Gibberling and the Soul of the Forest. Well, how do you best capitalize on this turn, though? There's a few different ways you can go about it, because I'm looking at that Arbor Up, I'm looking at the Soul of the Forest. I kind of want to find a way to maximize the efficiency of both here, Derek. What do you choose?
I would really like to see Soul of the Forest here from VirtuozZ, specifically because of what I talked about with the Samuro. A Rush minion was drawn, and it wasn't played. Literally every Rush minion in the deck would have been played, apart from Runthak and Samuro. So it's a 50-50 as to which one it could be here. And if it is Samuro, you get blown out of the game here. It's just over on the spot, because it would have the +2 attack to delete your board. So I've got to be honest, I'm not a fan of this play from VirtuozZ. I think he could have had the Soul of the Forest on board, kept all these 2/2s even if it was Samuro, and then followed up with the Arbor up afterwards. Having said that, he got lucky. It was not the Samuro. It was, in fact, the Runthak, so he gets to keep his whole board and then just win the game the turn after. But I do believe that that was an unnecessary risk.
Well, VirtuozZ is going to take that victory over Cheonsu, and with that, Token Druid able to get a Game 2 victory. And you know, we talk a little bit about that, but Rush Warrior is quite a bad matchup, so maybe in VirtuozZ's mind, if he's unfavored, he needs to take a 50-50 risk to try and win right now. Was it an important risk to take? I mean, that's kind of what's up for debate, and that's what makes competitive Hearthstone quite interesting, frankly, right? That's the whole point. VirtuozZ would probably tell you, I need to take a risk there in order to win, because Cheonsu could blow me out, and the longer I wait, the more I give him chances to do stuff like that. The other side of the coin is, you were such a good position, did you need to do something like that after an opening hand that was able to set up a board that's as powerful as it did? Regardless of what it is, the result is everything in this kind of environment. Being able to get the win just means that we can put that to rest for now and leave it up to the Twitter analysts and the Reddit data scientists to figure it out. For now, we're going to go into game number 3. Cheonsu's on his Miracle Rogue to try to see if he can get a win, giving Warrior a little bit of a break.
And as I have been subjecting everyone in the rehearsal calls alongside me to hear, I've been jamming a lot of Miracle Rogue over the last couple days to varying amounts of success. I'm glad we get to see it once again from Cheonsu here. I can't say I'm the biggest fan of his list. Like, it's not bad, obviously, because we're talking about 1 or 2 card inclusions that you use to close out the list. But 1 Foxy Fraud, 1 Ogremmancer, 1 Broomstick, surely one of those cards has to be better than the other, and you probably want to double down on that. Like, cutting the Foxy Fraud for the second Broomstick, or cutting the Ogremmancer for a second Foxy. Like, I think it's a little bit too spread out in terms of the options that you're going for there. But it's still Miracle Rogue, and against the likes of Mage, which I believe he's up against now as the one remaining deck for VirtuozZ, having double Neophyte and Ogremmancer will definitely be a large boon to his game plan, which I think, as I've seen, as the better and better Rogue players get, the closer this matchup feels. Because I do think it's a lot harder to play the matchup on the Rogue side than it is on the Mage's side. And in the Masters Tour here, when it's not just stupid old me on the Rogue side, I think it becomes a lot closer to a 50-50.
Yeah, and the data reflects that as well. So your analysis is accurate in almost every corner there, and we'll see whether or not Cheonsu can be the one making the plays happen. That being said, you know, it wouldn't surprise me to see if all of a sudden the script got flipped, and then Spellmate says, hey, I see an opening to just be very aggressive out of nowhere and start burning the opponent out, and then Rogue just has to deal with it and race them to the finish. And we've seen some really cool plays to do so. You know, No Hands Gamer came on broadcast earlier today, really put on a clinic on how to disrupt spell-based decks in general, and he's been doing that very effectively. So we shall see if the same could be done on Cheonsu's side. He needs to win here, and if he doesn't and he loses round number 9, he's at the mercy of tiebreakers for top 16. I think he has a pretty good shot given that he's at 7-1 right now, but you always want to maximize your chance and leave as little room for error for tiebreakers to really come to the mix, because it's always one of the hardest things to accept when you do so well. You tie with 8 other people, and you just happen to be on the bottom half of the group of tiebreakers, and you narrowly miss out on playoffs. It's always the brutal nature of Swiss tournaments.
It is, although I would argue that finishing 17th place and getting to tweet a picture of the bracket with an upside-down smiley face as the only message alongside that is almost worth more than losing directly in the top 16 just for a sympathy online from your fellow competitors. But jumping into the game right here for Cheonsu, I do think he's got himself a very juicy looking rogue hand. He's got the Octobot, which as long as it is not efficiently dealt with right at the start, pairs beautifully with this field contact. And he's got the Prize Plunderer to activate the Octobot should he need as well. Just looking like a good hand.
So many.
Looking like a quality hand all around. VirtuozZ could end up having a very good hand as well. If he picked up Incanter's Flow on turn 2. Did not. Found Cram Session. So we'll be playing a little bit more straight up from this perspective. Now from Cheonsu's side, the Efficient Octobot unlocks a ton of opportunity with all the cards that you mentioned. But I'm looking at that Cult Neophyte now all of a sudden thinking, well, how can Cheonsu really leverage this card to really make things hurt for VirtuozZ moving forward?
Yeah, I like the fact that he didn't go with the coin into Prize Plunderer here to activate his Octobot, because the punishes are, well, I suppose spell damage plus brain freeze, but the main ones are combustion and devolving missiles. And if he has either of those plays, it means he's not doing anything more broken on this turn. And the rest of his hand still functions reasonably well, even without the Octobot reduction in cost.
Initiating overdrive.
But he gets it here, which is a big deal.
Get it. All right, well, get to see a little bit of fireworks to start off this turn. Cheonsu can play this Cult Neophyte, Shadow Step the Neophyte, and play it again, drawing more additional cards and really refilling his hand. We also have seen some players at the very end feel like if they're not confident in their current quality of hand, have also Shadow Step their field contacts. Although I feel like there's a lot of card draw in Cheonsu with the idea that every one of these cards replaces themselves and he has Swindle. And I would really like to make it hurt for VirtuozZ, who's had a relatively slow start here.
Yeah, I'm interested in stepping like every other card in the hand. I don't want to Shadow Step the field contact here. There's benefit to Shadow Stepping the Cult Neophyte. Like, honestly, you could step the Neophyte and keep it in hand, is the kind of play that we saw from Luna the other day, where she was playing very, very greedily with these Cult Neophytes, wanting to hoard them in hand for multiple turns. In the end, Cheonsu steps it and just plays it again immediately, prioritizing immediate card draw, immediate damage over the potential of multiple turn disruption of spells, which is the way I would play it myself. It's just whenever Luna makes a play, you have to doubt your own game plan if it's not the one you're going for.
No disagreements here. Right now, VirtuozZ has to play a 4-mana Ruined Orb. It feels so bad. Ooh. Just to deal with the card draw threat, finds Incanter's Flow as a follow-up, but is it too slow? Is it too slow of a flow, Derek Brown?
What to do?
I don't think so. You have Refreshing Springwater in hand, so you can basically get immediate value out of it. Obviously, you can't play those both on turn 5, but I don't know. He has a lot of card draw in hand. You kind of want to make use of that by reducing the cost of your deck.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I think that one thing I'm curious about is whether or not he would just be taking a little bit too much damage because he doesn't have access to AoE. So by doing so, ends up falling just too far behind, you know, a step and a half, and then just bleeds out HP every single turn until he hits Flame Strike, or the turn that he has Flame Strike.
And what are you even looking at here? A Pexis Blast on the Man-Crick is probably the best you can get. I mean, maybe, honestly, you should Apexis Blast the Cult Neophyte as he ends up on in the end here, because if they can bounce that back to hand with another Shadow Step or with Tenwu, then having your whole hand made more expensive again would just be disastrous.
Yes, agreed. We're already kind of teetering on the this can be disastrous train pretty soon, but VirtuozZ still does have a good amount of resources in hand. I mean, in terms of the quality of hand, it's pretty much on the Mage's side, but just doesn't have enough time to put everything together, and that's what Rogue wants to capitalize upon. With an additional Octobot as well, can really start to plan for how he wants to curve into the Alexstrasza turn in the future. Goes with Secret Passage to try and start off the turn play. Finds more additional card draw and a couple of tempo tools.
And I got to say, again, I love this play from Cheonsu. I feel like I'm on the same wavelength with this man, because you don't want to go for the Neophyte going into turn 6. You want to do it going into turn 7, where they can Flame Strike or Mask of Cthulhu your board, and you would rather just find other ways to load up the pressure on this turn. Then you unload with the Cult Neophyte and disrupt their one crucial removal turn. And although he doesn't get the highest pressure secret passage I've ever seen, only really developing a broomstick in terms of tempo, I think it's great recognition of the timing of when you want to play Cult Neophyte in the matchup.
Yeah, and it makes sense, you know, like being able to recognize those situations and spots. I think Cheonsu was just simply counting how many cards he would have after the secret passage has finished, and he would return all the cards from his original hand, and I think he's at 9, so that was probably the only hesitation from Cheonsu's perspective, and everything turns out A-okay. You know who's not okay right now? Our mage player, our mage hero from Russia. Primordial Studies to start things off. Lab partner, okay. Maybe an opportunity.
Combustion now. Maybe you can make something happen. Draw a lot of cards.
I mean, you're talking about resources here. VirtuozZ has a ton of things going on.
What to do? Time runs out on me.
Maybe from his perspective, he knows that Cheonsu is setting up for a big disruption turn. Corrupted Ring Toss. Ice Barrier for life. Netherwind Portal, perhaps?
Yeah. I like both those choices. Yeah, absolutely. You just need to dump cards from your hand here to make room for the card draw with Spring Water and Cram Session. But now for Cheonsu, I think it is absolutely the time to go in with these Neophytes, as, I mean, what am I even talking about? Of course he already knows what to go for here. I think the only question is whether you start with the Octobot and activate it with your own Prize Plunderer, because then you can go both of those and then follow up with Neophyte, 10 wound Neophyte, in order to get double spell disruption on the following turn for VirtuozZ. It just makes it very awkward for him.
Ice Barrier is revealed. Cheonsu can choose to answer part of this board as well. Both of these minions are potentially problematic just because of the randomly generated resources, so he has to just be mindful of the possibility of what Cheonsu could do. There's still one minion of... I would imagine that at least, like, you know, there's a couple possibilities eliminated by the fact that VirtuozZ has been playing a little bit more tempo-oriented. The Called Neophyte really makes things sting, though. And VirtuozZ, because he hasn't played Encounter's Flow, even if he drew something like Mask of Cthulhu, it would still cost too much. And now, this is the part where it gets really rough. A board full of small, weenie minions can add up to quite the big force.
Yeah, I mean, it's approaching the territory where your best bet is Font of Power to discover Varden. Outside of that, you could go for draw through Spring Water to try and get Combustion. Would be the best that I can come up with. But I really don't see that getting there, especially as now if you do want to look for Varden, you only have one slot to get it. You almost wish there were minions in your deck so that you could at least discover one instead of just being given one randomly.
It's true, and now has to just stall out again. Hope that there's not too much damage on the follow-up, and we do know that the Alex Straza 10-wound combination is drawing closer with those two wicked stabs. Kazakis Golem Shaper comes into the hand for Cheonsu. Lots of opportunities to continue to tempo out, and also doesn't necessarily even have to pick a one-man Golem to drive as much pressure. Could take the 5, play Ring Toss here as a follow-up, which is pretty powerful after he's corrupted it.
Yeah, that's a good point, actually. Maybe you do just go for 5. as he's gone for, because really what he's trying to do is just bridge the turn until turn 10, where he can go for Alexstrasza, Tenwu, Alexstrasza again. That's why he saved Tenwu in his hand until this point. As I always do, almost forgot that the rogue, you get rogue secrets here off of ring toss instead of mage secrets, which is a bit worse overall.
Yeah, not the best, but you know, by all means, it's still very solid for disruption. Part of the whole thing is just to make VirtuozZ a little bit, his turn to clear a little bit more difficult. Speaking of difficult, VirtuozZ making it very annoying for Cheonsu to make any ground on the life total. Is just constantly running into barrier after barrier. Now VirtuozZ can actually start answering the board commandingly and maybe even find a way to position himself for success moving forward. Because if he's able to, you know, fade this aggression, the Alexstrasza Tenwu combo won't actually kill him for a few more turns. And even then, he's at 25, so Cheonsu would need to have a little bit extra, which is what the Wicked Stabs are supposed to represent here.
Yeah, I mean, that's honestly why I was very tempted from Cheonsu's perspective to actually just not attack there at all, because on this turn, by only attacking for 3 damage, he gave 5 health to VirtuozZ rather than taking it away, and it's basically banking saying, I will deal 5 damage through minions and weapon hits this game, which I don't know if that is necessarily true.
Time runs out on me.
Well, VirtuozZ does not get the Spell Burst activation because summons afterwards. VirtuozZ can see trying to commit to a line which can save him maybe in a turn or two. Is going to go ahead and pause. Alexstrasza comes down, has the Shadow Step ready to go. It can play it next turn as well. This is very much telegraphing what's about to happen. And there's not much that VirtuozZ can do, I believe, given that you know, there's no way to stop that interaction, and there's no way for VirtuozZ to block that damage.
Yeah, this is the lock, and it's a really smart play from Cheonsu. He realizes this enables double Alexstrasza next turn rather than on turn 10. The banana for 0 mana. One of the most niche and often pointless interactions in Hearthstone is that the banana does go to 0 mana if you've cast Incantus Flow. I have no idea why that's the case. It makes no sense whatsoever, but there it is. Fun bit of trivia.
Yeah, I think it's for a really interesting interaction, which is like technically it counts as a card in your deck, and it transforms it like the moment before you pick it up. It's not entirely relevant whatsoever in 99.9% of the cases. And this is one of those situations where completely irrelevant. Cheonsu is going to wrap up game 3. The Alexstrasza combo is going to end it. Even had the Wicked Stabs, so it's not even necessarily the Tenwu combo either. And that's going to be Cheonsu taking game 3 in a very easy one, right? There wasn't any real good start from VirtuozZ, but more importantly, Cheonsu showing you how disruption can be a very powerful tool against what Mage is trying to do, especially if they don't even have those outs with Incanter's Flow and Deck of Lunacy like they did in the past.
That's right. It feels just very, very clunky when you don't hit the Incantus Flows, and therefore for VirtuozZ, we've still 2 chances left to get a win. This is where you're telling yourself, it's okay, everyone gets bad draws with Mage, it happens, don't freak out about it, obviously in Russian. But the fear does start to creep in at this point.
Just a little bit, you know. I think usually after game 4, that's when the panic starts to really seep in. But around the midway point of game 4, you can start to maybe see that, and players are like, "Oh no, not like this." You know, I was in such a good spot. I was up 2-0. I thought my hand was entirely reasonable, but you know, we still have a decent amount of Hearthstone to play here potentially, depending on how Cheonsu's decks will do. As we do know that he has Druid and his Warrior remaining. Now, the Druid against the Mage, we actually haven't really seen too much of the Druid perform against it. It's been the other classes that Druid seems to be facing right now more in terms of the Master Sword Orgrimmar. But in terms of its matchup, it does seem that it is pretty heavily favored. It's one of its best matchups that's not named Shaman, where it has a 100% win rate by a whopping sampling size of 1 game. And then Hunter is won 5 out of 6 games for a very strong 80%. But if you wipe that out, its best matchup in terms of popular stuff is Mage. So Cheonsu still has that opportunity to really bring this into a Game 5 series.
And it makes sense, right? Mage often doesn't really get going until like turn 4, turn 5. In these early turns, the best removal they can possibly hope to levy is some combination of Devolving Missiles, Brain Freeze, and Combustion, which is potent, but you have to draw all those cards, and you're definitely not mulliganing for them. You are mulliganing for Incantus Flow, Spring Water, the usual cards. You don't want to mess around with removal as Mage. Your best game plan, in my opinion, is to pray that the Druid doesn't get a good hand, so you're not just dead on turn 4, and then after that, you want to go with your own game plan, where you are going for these miracle turns with gaining mana off of the refreshing Spring Water rather than just refreshing it. But that is obviously very, very difficult to pull off. And so I think Cheonsu is in a great position to get things back up to 2 games apiece here, even with his slightly... it shows how solid of a deck Token Druid is. I was going to call it a wacky build here, where he's got 2 Guidance instead of the 2 Soul of the Forest. It's not a very important differentiation here, because even against Mage, I don't even see the Soul of the Forest being especially important.
Yeah, I have to agree there as well. And we've seen some mages struggle against those kinds of boards. I mean, Mage struggled against a board of 1/2s and 2/1s just now. So it can definitely struggle if those minions end up getting stronger and gaining Death Rattle Summon a 2/2 Treant. So let's go into it. Well, Cheonsu does have that difference of that deck list that you were mentioning. So not necessarily as easily convenient unless Guidance or the Nature Studies was able to generate that specific Death Rattle spell card. Opening hands do look like Cheonsu will want to at least try to find cards that can gain him some more resources before he hits that Glowfly Storm. And then for VirtuozZ, same kind of concept. Wants that early Encounters flow that seemed to have eluded him for so many of those early turns previously.
These are both really interesting mulligans, in my opinion, because on VirtuozZ's side, he had that kind of hand I was talking about, where Shooting Star can deal with Gibberlings. Combustion can deal with 3 Treants very often on the other side of the board, but he doesn't want to keep them, and I think this is just correct. Again, you have to be proactive in your game plan, and so I think he gave himself the best possible chance of doing that, even if he didn't find the flow quite yet. And from Cheonsu's side, throwing away the Innovate there is also a very tough decision, because if he got himself Guess the Weight, as we see in hand, he would be praying for an Innovate to have in hand now so that he could go for a turn 3 Glowfly Swarm. But because of how crucial it is to hit the card draw before you go for Glowfly Swarm, I definitely don't begrudge his choice.
Is it less? Is it more for Cheonsu to get that extra resource? It's usually more. 0 and 1 mana, you want to pick more. And then everything else you can... Oh, well, for 2 mana slot, it's anyone's guess. And then everything else is less for Cheonsu. VirtuozZ finds a Arcane Intellect on 3. Finds Deck of Lunacy to create some real spicy potential here. We might see some fireworks this game.
There it is. That's the win con. He found it. I was saying how you can struggle to find removal as Mage when you have Deck of Lunacy into Incantus Flow and your opponent didn't just play Lightning Bloom into Glowfly Swarm. Okay. This is very winnable now for VirtuozZ.
I mean, VirtuozZ has the refreshing Spring Water to try and draw these very cheap spells relative to what the original cost was. Deck of Chaos is not it.
Oh!
Oh! No! Look at me, look at me, look at me. I'm the Token Druid now. Concede! Instantly, VirtuozZ takes game 4, wraps up his Swiss tournament in dramatic fashion, and a little bit of a chuckle. Wow, what a turn of events. And you know what? Cheonsu knew exactly what time it was. It's time to take a break and see if he makes the top 16. What a finish to that series, Derek.
You always forget just how toxic Deck of Lunacy is, don't you? Like, it's been brought from 2 to 4 mana, and you think, oh, brilliant, it's problem solved. You don't have to deal with that anymore. And then you just get... Imagine trying to keep playing out in that instance as the Druid. You should have learned your lesson at this point. As soon as you see the Deck of Lunacy, you just concede on the spot, because you never beat that.
Yeah, it's Cheonsu's fault, honestly, that all that happened. So, yeah, I agree with your analysis, Derek, and well said. Here is the highlight, which incidentally showed you pretty much the half of the cards being played in this game. Cycle of Hatred, indeed. I've been hard-pressed to find a more athlete-named card being played in this situation.